Story 1. I have met 19-year-olds who carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, possess more life experience than they should, and whom I would not call kids. Conversely, I have also met 40-year-olds who rely on their parents to pay their bills, buy their groceries, and manage their dating lives. I would consider them children. Story 2. For me, it's not about age, it's about maturity. If I had to express it in words, I would say that if I meet someone and at any point think, this person needs to grow up, then that individual is still immature. I suppose this is just my opinion, and I bet there are people who think I'm still immature as well. Story 3. As I get older, younger people also age. When I was between 18 and 25, it seemed like everyone was younger than 18. Now that I am nearing 40, I still observe childish tendencies and behaviors in many individuals under 25. Story 4. I feel like a large child stuck in a 48-year-old body. My husband is a large child stuck in a 61-year-old body. We refuse to grow up. We are toys, are us kids. Story 5. I feel that, objectively, an 18-year-old is still a kid. I believe that starting at 19 is when they really begin transitioning to adulthood. At 20, they are considered adults. Regarding when I would look at someone with complete confidence in their ability to handle adult responsibilities and engage in adult activities, I would say someone who is 35 years or older. Story 6. I was a middle school teacher, and I can say that the average child stops being truly a child around ages 12 to 13. It's a slow process that probably doesn't end until the early 20s, but it begins at puberty, and we shouldn't act like it doesn't. Story 7. I am 33 years old and enjoying my life by spending my money on Pokemon games and 90s nostalgia now that I can afford it. Age is just a number. The world would be a better place if more people were still trying to impress that little kid deep down inside themselves. Story 8. Provide us with some context. Someone who can be independent in daily functioning is no longer a child, typically at around 8 or 9 years old. However, someone who is injured in war at 22 is still referred to as just a kid. Story 9. Age doesn't define maturity. Responsibility does. Some 25-year-olds still act like children, while some 15-year-olds have experienced much of what the world has to offer. Story 10. I think it depends more on maturity and emotional intelligence than on age. I am 21, but I might as well be 17. However, I know other 21-year-olds who seem very stable and independent. Story 11. I am about to be 43, and I still view anyone college-aged as a kid. 25 seems to be the age when you are essentially an adult, in my opinion. Story 12. Never, apparently, for my parents. I just turned 18 and I'm still a kid. I mean, they are South Asian, and that explains a lot. To be honest, I don't mind everything being done for me. Story 13. I am 25 years old, and when I look in the mirror, I do not recognize the grown man looking back at me because in my mind, I am still 16. I shared this thought with my dad, and he feels the same way at 62, so who knows? Story 14. I don't think there is a specific age, but some people never grow up. They remain in that self-centered, oblivious, and reckless state of mind that children have. Story 15. My ex-husband would throw literal toddler temper tantrums, flailing his arms and legs on the floor if he didn't get his way. I believe some disordered individuals may remain mentally like children their entire lives. Story 16. It depends on the individual. I have met people of all ages who still have a youthful spirit, even after retirement. Most of them are in full control of their faculties. Story 17. Anyone more than about 5 years younger than me at any given time, I'm 53 years old, feels like a baby in arms if they are 15 years younger. Story 18. That is a very contextual question. The strict definition refers to pre-adolescence. As legal adults, I would say anyone under 25 is still considered a child. If you are referring to someone in relation to their career, I would say under 30. Story 19. I was living on my own and working 2 jobs at age 17. I have no patience for adults who fail to act responsibly. Story 20. Anyone younger than me is still a child. If you are arguing in the comments on Reddit, you are definitely still a child regardless of your age. Story 21. I would say under 30. I have always viewed age like this. The first 12 years you're a baby. You're a child in your teens. A teenager in your 20s. A young adult in your 30s. Completely grown in your 40s but still relatively young. You can still be pretty youthful and active in your 40s. You're definitely too young to die at least. In your 50s you're not exactly old, but you aren't young anymore either. In your 60s you're approaching old age. In your 70s and beyond you're officially old. Story 22. When they still use a pillow fort to hide from the monster under the bed. But let's be real, adults do that too. Story 23. I believe this before the internet even existed. People are always like children outside of key moments in their lives. Story 24. People are no longer children when they decide not to do the hopscotch grid drawn on the sidewalk. Story 25. I'm 28 and I still can't believe I'm about to be 30 with my immaturity. I'm at the age where I can have kids and people would expect that. It's wild. Story 26. I believe anyone under 21 is still quite young. While some may argue that individuals aged 18 to 21 are adults, I feel that dating someone significantly younger, such as an 18-year-old, would be very awkward. Story 27. My husband teases me about thinking that everyone younger than me is a kid since I'm in my early 30s. I always rolled my eyes and denied it until recently when my 20-year-old stepchild had a friend over. This friend is 24 and had the energy of, I'm a 24-year-old teenager. I begrudgingly had to admit that my husband was more right than I wanted to believe because I had to resist my maternal urge to send this friend home with a packed lunch. Story 28. I am neurodivergent and feel that I will always have a youthful spirit. I have a core memory of my boss asking me to come to his desk every day to check in on time-off requests, and I was there first thing each day until he updated me. He told me, "You're like a child." At 24, I followed his instructions and felt belittled in that moment. Being childlike isn't always negative. Some people are just wired differently. Story 29. It changes as you get older. You will always look at younger people and think, you're a baby. In my opinion, this perspective lasts until your mid to late 20s, when you have actually spent some time in the adult world and taken on real responsibilities. Story 30. Frontier kids married as teenagers and started farming in families. Today, kids leave college in their mid-20s, wander around until their 30s before starting a family. Some wait until their 40s because they saw a celebrity have a baby at 50, so they think they have plenty of time left. Story 31. I think it depends on your inherent composition as well as your experiences. People can endure a lot, grow up quickly, and become adults at 18. Some individuals never mature and behave like children at 50. On average, I would say adulthood often begins in the mid-30s. Even if you have children, a good job, and a home at 32, you are still likely youthful and naive. I believe full adulthood hit me around 40. That's when I started to question and analyze everything, eliminate negativity from my life, distance myself from unworthy individuals, and realize what truly matters to me. Understanding that life is short. Story 32. I have met 60-year-old, immature individuals who stir drama and shirk responsibilities. I have also met 16-year-old, hardworking, emotionally stable people who support their families. Completely depends on attitude. Story 33. At nearly 50, anyone 25 and under is still a child in my eyes. It's strange how, regardless of your age, people around your age look like your peers, while everyone else appears either as children or elderly individuals. Story 34. I turned 28 this year, and my mother-in-law told me I was a baby. I thought, didn't you have 2 kids and a divorce at my age? Story 35. I turned 30 today and told my best friend that I finally don't feel like a young adult anymore. Story 36. The word kid is a colloquial term for a pre-adolescent, referring to a child who has not yet started puberty. Story 37. It depends on the individuals. I know some 16-year-olds who have a better work ethic and are more responsible than some people in their 30s and 40s. I don't think it's fair to define kids solely by age. Don't get me wrong. I still refer to young people as kids. At my age, I still consider people in their 20s to be kids, but that doesn't necessarily mean I treat them as such. Story 38. Probably 20. I feel that just because 18 and 19 are technically adult ages, it doesn't mean you stop being a teenager. Story 39. I would say maturity helps us move beyond childhood, but as humans, we should always want to remain a kid at heart. I believe that when we lose our playful spirit and sense of wonder and imagination, we stop being a child and become an adult. Story 40. Kid isn't always related to age. I would consider 18 or 19 to be a kid, but there are individuals that age who have experienced significant challenges and developed coping mechanisms that make them wiser than many adults. Conversely, some 18 or 19-year-olds have also faced difficulties and used those experiences as excuses for irresponsible behavior. Kid is more of a personality trait than an age classification, although age is still a significant factor. On average, I would say the age range is 22 to 24. These are often considered post-college party years. They may still make mistakes but are learning to improve. This doesn't mean they should be treated as if they lack potential. It's a common error to assume that just because someone is expected to make mistakes, they should not be held to certain standards. Story 41. When they have their life together. Someone at 20 can be a full adult if they have had a full-time job since 17 and are fully self-sufficient, paying their own bills, getting married, and looking to have a child soon. Alternatively, they can still be seen as a child if they live with their parents, have never dated, and are fully supported by their parents. Most people transition into real adulthood gradually over the years after high school, during college, or an apprenticeship. Story 42. It's a complicated question, and as a couple of others have mentioned, context really matters. If something tragic happens to someone who is 20, I feel they are still quite young mentally. However, I dislike how society tends to infantilize young adults today. I find it frustrating to hear the misconception that brains don't fully develop until the age of 25, which is often not mentioned alongside the fact that brain function can start to decline at 30. When I was 25, I was a homeowner, engaged, and working in my career. The idea of being viewed as a kid is absurd to me. Story 43. 40-year-olds are often so sure of themselves and smug, living beyond their means. That is why they have no home equity and payments on 2 vehicles, just waiting for the next catastrophe. Story 44. That depends entirely on a case-by-case basis. You can find 80-year-olds who act immaturely, and you can find 12-year-olds who are essentially raising their younger siblings like adults. Story 45. I am in my mid-30s and do not consider myself an adult. I am not mature or responsible enough to be married, let alone have a family, nor do I have any interest in it. I own a house and have a career, but that is as close as I get to adulthood. Story 46. It depends on your situation. I moved out at 16, was married and a homeowner at 21, and had 2 children by 25. I was definitely living life to the fullest from 16 to 21 and acting like a child, but I matured quickly after that. Some people take longer to mature. Story 47. If I consider culpability for their own actions, I will say that those 17 and younger are still kids. Story 48. I just turned 18 a week ago, and I still feel like a kid even though I've gotten a bit older. I might even be going to camp this summer, maybe until my early 20s. Story 49. Honestly, I think everyone is different. I didn't feel like an adult until I was around 30. Even then, it also depends on how sheltered of a life you've lived. Some have gone through so much in their youth that they are more of an adult at 10 than some 30-year-olds. Have you ever watched young children who, at 6 years old, are handling household chores while caring for younger siblings? They are quite impressive. Does that make them adults? I don't know. Story 50. At a minimum, under the age of 18. Generally, I consider anyone about 10 years younger than me, which means anyone younger than 25. As I get older, that range will probably change in accordance with my age, so when I'm 50, I'll likely start thinking of people in their 30s as kids. Story 51. I feel like an adult instead of an immature young adult now at 28 to 30 years old. I feel markedly different than I did in my teens and early 20s. The whimsy is still present for me. but things make sense, and I feel stable and prepared for life. Story 52. I feel it is quite rare for someone to reach true adulthood until their mid-20s at the earliest. However, I know many people of all ages who behave like children. I believe the key factor is recognizing that you are responsible for your actions and their consequences. Story 53. Our nieces and nephews are in their 30s. They were 5 when my wife and I started dating, and we still refer to them as kids. Story 54. My dad just turned 70, and I was the one shushing him in the movie theater when we went to celebrate. It doesn't matter how old you are. What matters is your willingness to continue playing. Just like a little kid, he became more mischievous when I tried to correct his behavior in the movie theater. Story 55. Around 23, we can no longer say, but really, he or she is still a kid when a poor decision is made. Story 56. When I was 18, I used to dislike my dad calling people in their 20s bloody kids when he was annoyed. However, now that I'm older, I find this view somewhat justified. The brain does not finish maturing until around age 25, so there is some truth to it. Nonetheless, I do make an effort to treat people as adults once they have left school. Story 57. I believe children should stop being treated like kids around the age of 12. They should begin to be treated like adults at 16 and be considered adults by 20. They should always continue to grow as individuals. Story 58. For most people, the transition to adulthood typically occurs between the ages of 23 and 25. Some individuals become adults earlier due to specific circumstances, while others remain in a childlike state for a longer period. Story 59. Given that in humans the frontal lobe does not fully develop until their 20s, I would say they are still children until it fully develops. Story 60. I stop using the excuse of they don't know better, they're kids, when a child behaves immaturely in a way that negatively affects someone. By ages 18 to 19, I begin to feel pity for those who are taken advantage of due to their immaturity. Otherwise, my pity and empathy level out. Story 61. I think 20 is probably the last year for being a child on average. However, it completely depends on the individual. Some people are wise beyond their years and have their lives together by 16. Story 62. I start calling them young adults at 16. That's typically when society expects young people to start behaving like adults, so they deserve respect. Story 63. My wife and I are both around 40 years old, and we met as teenagers. Sometimes it feels like we have never grown up, just kids being goofy together. Story 64. I am in my 30s and I still feel like a child. I always believed that I would experience a moment when a switch flipped in my brain and I would suddenly become an adult. That did not occur. It was enlightening to realize that this does not happen for anyone. Suddenly, the world makes a little more sense. Story 65. Once you reach your 30s, people with children appear to diverge from those without. I wouldn't characterize childless individuals as being childish, but they seem more individualistic and hedonistic, showing less concern about where society is heading. I mention this as someone without children. Story 66. It's tough because I believe the real answer is that adulthood occurs at different ages for different people. In general, I would say it depends on whether you have become accustomed to living independently and providing for yourself. For example, I would consider a 21-year-old who went straight from high school to college with their parents paying their way to still be a child, while a 21-year-old who has been living independently and providing for themselves since 18 is more of an adult. Story 67. I'm an adult from the South. If you have a job at any age or are doing your best to help society or loved ones, I will address you as sir or ma'am. However, if you are 30 and relying on others, I consider you a child. Story 68. It depends. Did they just die a tragic, innocent death? Being 30 or under means they are still young. Did they cut me off in traffic or do something rude to me on public transit? Once they are over 17, they are an adult who should know better. Story 69. If you want a hard number, it's probably between 28 and 30. However, more practically, I think it's when people stop caring about superficial opinions and how others view them. For many, this happens in their mid-30s, while for others it varies. With the obsession with social media now, especially platforms like Instagram and TikTok, I could see this changing. Story 70. I remember being annoyed when anyone referred to me as a kid in my 20s. Over 30 years later, I totally understand it now. I've looked at young couples with babies and thought of all three of them as kids, but it's more a reflection of how I feel about my age than it is about them. Getting old is strange. Story 71. I am 44 years old, and someone mentioned they were in their early 20s. I thought to myself, you were still just a kid. But I thankfully didn't say it out loud. Story 72. It depends on the individual and their environment. Some people are forced to grow up much too early, while others need to mature. I feel like I stopped being a kid when I was 14 because I had to start working full-time and dropped out of high school at 16 to work 70-hour weeks. Story 73. I'm 24 and look back on my 22-year-old self as still a kid. Back then, I thought I was all grown up and that my 20-year-old self was a kid. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if we ever stop being a kid in some way. Story 74. Anything under 25 seems to me to be little more than a high school student. Under 20 and you might as well be in diapers. Story 75. Not so much about age as it is about life experience. Anyone still pursuing education and who hasn't yet worked a full-time job, for example, is still a kid, even if they are 25. Story 76. I turned 25 in the summer. There's a lot more motivation in everything I do. So, I would say being 25 brings new perspectives. Story 77. My brother, who is 10 years older than me, told me as a teenager that he never took anyone 25 and under seriously, and that always stuck with me. People 25 and under are figuring things out. Those 25 and older are still figuring things out, but with more insight into the world. Story 78. I think once you live on your own, reality settles in and people grow up from doing what they want to what they have to. In saying that, when you grow up, you're still a kid, just with responsibilities and different values. I still lock the windows when I pass gas, and I'm 32.